Good evening YouTube, welcome back to another Model Railways for Beginners. This is episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about soldering and wiring in droppers. I'm going to take a look at the best ways to solder onto the track and different methods of fitting your droppers in place. There's a lot of different ways that you can solder your droppers on, and each way has its benefits, each way has its cons. It's mostly just personal preference. I like to do it when the track's already glued in place, or I'm going to show you fitting them whilst it's ballasted in case you need to add a dropper in afterwards. But my preferred method is once everything's fixed in place, you're happy with it, drill your holes and then get your droppers soldered in place. So let's jump right in and have a look at soldering the droppers on. See you in a minute. Jumping straight into it then, let's have a look. You're going to need soldering iron, preferably with a smallish point on it. This is one that I bought on eBay. It's got a little digital readout on it. I'm going to plug it in. I have it set to about 400 degrees, and when it stops flashing it's up to temperature. It only takes a couple of literally about 30 seconds to heat up. Brilliant little thing, only about £8, and that's it. We're up to temperature and ready to go. Now I'm just using a piece of wet sponge to clean my tip so it's nice and clean. The first method I'm going to show you is without ballast. This is the way that I prefer to do it. I've just got some flux core solder and the soldering iron, and all we're going to do is heat the rail up, apply the solder, and there we have it. A nice blob of solder on there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tin the end of the piece of wire I'm going to use. Again, you don't want to preheat the wire on this, as the temperature will melt the insulation around it. So the longer you hold your iron on there, the more insulation you're going to melt away. So as quick as possible, just applying a tinning on the end. Clean off the soldering iron. And now I've pre-drilled a hole through the baseboard there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this piece of wire up through the hole that I've drilled and out near the rail. There we go. So you've got your blob of tinned rail and your wire. Bend the end of your wire towards the direction of the rail, so that when you pull it down, now you want it just below the level of the rail head, so as not to cause any interference with rolling stock or anything like that. And all we're going to do, be careful not to melt the chairs. I'm doing this back to front to show you on the camera. Melting the solder onto the wire, and there we have it. He says as he pulls it off again. You may want a bit more solder on this. Things always go wrong when you're doing it on camera. Beautiful. So that's your first rail joint, nice and simple. I promise you it's much easier when you are not trying to hold the board at the same time as well as being on camera. So that's it, nice and simple. And you do that on both sides of the rail, on the outside only. If you do it on the inside, you risk catching the flanges of the wagons going across. So the next way I'm going to show you exactly the same method. It's just obviously the rail's already ballasted. So again, I have pre-drilled a hole for the wire to come up through, which is right here. And same as before, we're just going to heat the rail, apply the solder. You'll know when the rail's hot enough because the solder will take to it easily. You want to, whenever you're doing soldering, obviously next to plastics, next to insulation on the wire, you want to be as quick as possible while still getting a proper joint. Tinning the wire again. Getting a nice tin on there, because I don't think I've got enough on the last one. Cleaning the soldering iron off, and then feed it through, same as before. And again, just pulling it down, making sure it's bent in towards the rail, and then making sure it's below the rail head. Touch on, and there you have your second joint. And all you need to do, if you have got any bits of ballast that have come away when you were drilling, when you were soldering, just go back along and just fill any little gaps in. And there you have your basic dropper wires soldered onto your track. So the next thing we're going to do is have a look at some wiring for bus wires. I don't tend to use a bus wire. I'll show you my method of doing things, but we'll talk about bus wires as well. So back in a minute. Okay, so now we've got dropper wires in place, let's talk about bus wires. So the majority of people, if I draw the trackbed, that being a joint in the middle between two pieces of track, most people will have underneath the layout a pair of wires running the complete length of the layout, and all they do then is the droppers are connected onto the bus wires, and obviously you'll have a pair of those running the entire layout, and the second dropper wire will come on to the second one like so. So that's one method, and again that's never been a method that I have used. I feel it's a little unnecessary. I've had a large layout that's gone around an entire room and never had the requirement for this. I can understand it if you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 trains running all at once, but for me, I've only ever had a maximum of like 2 and 1 shunting in a yard to 3 max. So my method is to have a piece of track here, a piece of track here. So the main in-feed for me from the controller is coming into this piece of track here, and then from that piece of track all I do is link both of the rails to the next piece of track, in effect using the rails itself as your bus wire. Now, as I've said, this has never caused me a problem. I've always had adequate power, I've never had dead spots, I've never had areas of the layout where it's slowed down, sped up, because don't forget, this bridge that you are creating between the two pieces of track is also supported by your fish plate. So you've got the continuity from the fish plate and also the link wire on each rail. And if you're creating a full loop, that power is going in a continuous loop, and it doesn't matter where the loco is, as it will always have continuous power. The only difference comes when you have electrified points using insulated fish plates. You might want to use a thicker gauge of wire to feed power, but again that will be coming separately to the frog of the point, as a link wire would defeat the purpose of an insulated fish point. Okay, so with that said, I am going to leave that there. I'm not going to dive into this on this episode. We've got our 2 droppers, and all I would do with those is I would drill a hole to the next piece of rail on the next board joint. So in that case it would be on this side. So I'd join a piece of wire from here to here, bridging the gap. In there you'd have a fish plate as well. That is how I wire my track up, and it has never caused me any power loss or any overheating of wires, anything like that, even using as thin a gauge wire as this. It's always been completely adequate for the needs of, say, about 4 maximum locos. But the choice is up to you. This is how I do it. Everyone has their own different ways of doing things. This just keeps it simple. Anyway, thanks again for watching. We'll leave it there for today. I hope you have a little better understanding of wiring in your droppers. These blobs of solder that you've got, they are going to be painted over when you weather it, but you can always file them down, do whatever you want to reduce the size of them. You can always reheat them and take some of the solder off if you want to. But again, nice and simple, none of this complicated bus wire stuff. So once again, thanks for watching. If you could like the videos, if you're enjoying them, if they're useful to you, share them about anyone that you might think of that could do with a helping hand. And of course, leave any comments, any suggestions, always welcome. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.